What exactly is hiding in the absolute, freezing darkness between the stars? When we look up at the night sky, we are conditioned to look for the light. We seek out the warm, familiar, comforting glow of distant yellow suns, subconsciously hoping to find another quiet, stable Earth hidden somewhere in the vast void. But the universe absolutely does not care about our terrestrial comfort. The physical data aggressively confirms that deep space is a highly hostile, violently chaotic environment. The exoplanets we are about to explore are not peaceful, blue marbles. They are terrifying physical anomalies, massive, churning spheres of molten metal, absolute darkness, and radioactive ash that completely shatter our foundational understanding of how planetary physics actually works. 750 light-years straight out from Earth, deep in the dark constellation of Draco, a massive gas giant exactly the size of Jupiter orbits a quiet, yellow sun. It is officially designated TRES 2b. In 2011, highly sensitive photometric data from the Kepler Space Telescope meticulously measured the exact amount of starlight reflecting off the surface of this distant planet. The precise measurement recorded an albedo, or total reflectivity, of strictly less than 1%. According to the absolute most precise, verified astrophysical models, the entire planet mathematically reflects just 0.04% of the light that physically hits it. To truly understand the terrifying scale of this anomaly, we absolutely must establish a baseline. A standard, rough piece of black coal dug from the Earth reflects roughly 5% of the light that hits it. Dark black acrylic paint reflects significantly less. TRES 2b is mathematically aggressively darker than both. It is the absolute darkest planetary body ever discovered in our entire galaxy, a massive silent sphere of absolute light-devouring blackness. The standard, widely accepted astrophysical model for a massive gas giant, exactly like our own familiar Jupiter, assumes the heavy presence of highly reflective, thick ammonia clouds. Jupiter easily reflects well over a third of the harsh sunlight that strikes it, but TRES 2b orbits its host star at an incredibly close distance of just 5 million kilometers. It is permanently tidally locked, meaning one side always faces the fire, and its dayside surface temperature far exceeds 1,000 degrees Celsius. At this extreme, brutal temperature, reflective ammonia clouds absolutely cannot physically exist. They would instantly burn away. Instead, the thick atmosphere is composed entirely of vaporized sodium, volatile potassium, and gaseous titanium oxide. These elements are well known to actively absorb light. But this is exactly where the raw physical data completely fractures the standard scientific model. Even the heavily combined light-absorbing properties of these harsh chemicals absolutely cannot mathematically account for the absolute, terrifying darkness of TRES 2b. The massive planet is absolutely not simply dark. It is effectively, totally invisible against the void, save for a faint, deep red thermal glow, looking exactly like a massive, dying ember buried in a cold fire. Professional astronomers openly admit a profound, glaring gap in their models. There is absolutely an unidentified, highly complex chemical compound, or an entirely unknown atmospheric mechanism, completely dominating this dark world. If our absolute foundational models of atmospheric chemistry completely fail to explain a massive planet that aggressively absorbs 99.96% of all light, how many other fundamental physical laws are currently failing completely in the deep, freezing dark of the galaxy? 640 light-years away, spinning in the constellation of Pisces, is a violent exoplanet that aggressively demonstrates that the absolute most terrifying weather systems in the entire universe are literally built from heavy metals. The exoplanet WASP 76b is an ultra-hot Jupiter, completely, permanently tidally locked to its massive host star. Highly complex observations from the Very Large Telescope, heavily located in Chile, utilizing the highly sensitive espresso instrument, absolutely confirm that the dayside temperature reaches an incinerating, unearthly 2,400 degrees Celsius. At this precise, horrific temperature, standard planetary physics violently shatters. Iron, a heavy element which absolutely requires immense, roaring industrial blast furnaces to melt down here on Earth, behaves entirely, completely differently here. On the blazing day side of WASP, 76b, solid iron instantly vaporizes. It converts directly into a volatile, superheated gas, rapidly rising deep into the upper atmosphere. Massive, churning thermal winds, completely driven by the extreme, violent temperature gradient existing directly between the permanent day and the freezing permanent night, aggressively catch this heavy iron vapor. These roaring supersonic currents violently sweep the heavy metallic gas straight across the terminator line, the sharp twilight boundary, and carry it directly into the pitch-black, freezing night side of the planet. Here, the temperatures violently drop by nearly 1,000 degrees. As the superheated iron vapor rapidly cools in the dark, it aggressively undergoes heavy condensation. It physically forms massive, heavy, metallic clouds, and then it falls. WASP 76b is a dark world where it literally rains molten liquid iron. The stunning counterintuitive reversal is that this completely apocalyptic, violent environment operates strictly on the exact, identical thermodynamic principles as Earth's gentle water cycle: evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. But absolutely, instead of gentle rain softly nourishing a green biosphere, thousands of heavy tons of molten iron aggressively plummet directly from the sky in the pitch black, violently driven by massive hurricane-force winds. Exactly 120 light-years from Earth, sitting in the constellation of Leo, slowly orbits a strange Sub-Neptune exoplanet designated K2-18b. It safely possesses roughly 8.6 times the heavy mass of Earth and sits absolutely squarely within the highly coveted habitable zone of its red dwarf star. In 2023, the highly advanced James Webb Space Telescope directly pointed its near-infrared spectrograph at this specific world, heavily analyzing the faint starlight filtering straight through its thick atmosphere. The data returned was absolutely unprecedented. The JWST firmly confirmed the heavy presence of complex carbon-bearing molecules, specifically methane and carbon dioxide. A stark shortage of ammonia further heavily supported a highly specific, totally radical planetary model. The mainstream scientific consensus is now heavily shifting to officially classify K2-18b as a highly rare Haitian world, a planet entirely, completely covered by a massive global liquid water ocean, heavily blanketed right under a thick, highly compressed hydrogen-rich atmosphere. But the raw JWST data actively contained a secondary, shocking physical spike that sent massive shockwaves directly through the entire scientific community. The spectrograph detected the possible faint presence of dimethyl sulfide, or DMS. Here on Earth, dimethyl sulfide is a highly specific, complex organic compound. It is produced absolutely exclusively by biological life. Specifically, it is generated heavily by massive blooms of marine phytoplankton in our deep oceans. There is absolutely currently no known abiotic or completely non-biological, geological process capable of actively producing DMS in any significant quantities. The stark, counterintuitive reversal lies exactly in the planet's highly hostile nature. Despite the massive global ocean and the potential tantalizing biosignature, K2-18b is absolutely not Earth-like. The thick, heavy hydrogen atmosphere actively creates crushing, terrifying surface pressures. The red dwarf host star regularly, violently bathes the entire planet in massive, deadly flares of harsh ultraviolet radiation. The global ocean may actually be completely boiling hot rather than peacefully temperate. The honest, scientific limit of astrophysics strictly requires restraint. The detection of DMS is highly preliminary and absolutely requires further, prolonged, rigorous validation. It is a potential, unconfirmed biosignature, absolutely not confirmed proof of a swimming alien biosphere. Yet, If a crushing, highly irradiated, violently hydrogen-choked ocean world actually possesses the exact, specific chemical signature of living marine phytoplankton, does the cold universe truly require gentle, Earth-like conditions to actively generate biology, or does life simply violently exploit absolutely any available chemistry, entirely regardless of the utter violence of the environment? Deep in the constellation of Monoceros, nearly exactly 500 light-years away, exists a terrible world that closely resembles the absolute deepest, darkest circles of classical mythology. Discovered in 2009 by the European Space Agency's CoRoT mission, CoRoT 7b is a dense, rocky super-Earth with a mass roughly exactly 5 times that of our own planet. What makes CoRoT 7b highly anomalous is its absolutely terrifying, suicidal proximity to its burning star. The planet orbits at a terrifyingly close distance of just 2.5 million kilometers. To directly translate this massive scale, our tiny Mercury safely orbits our Sun at nearly 60 million kilometers. CoRoT 7b is so incredibly close to its stellar host that a single, full year, a complete rapid orbit, lasts merely exactly 20 hours. Because of this extreme gravitational proximity, the planet is completely, permanently, tidally locked. The highly accepted, mainstream geological model absolutely confirms a devastating, horrific physical reality. The side directly facing the star endures permanent, blinding daylight, with brutal surface temperatures, easily reaching 2,600 degrees Celsius. The terrifying counterintuitive reversal is that CoRoT 7b is a solid rocky planet. Completely unlike massive gas giants that quickly vaporize or bleed away their thick atmospheres in the heat, heavy rocks physically melt. The entire massive dayside hemisphere of CoRoT 7b is completely covered by a vast, churning, rolling ocean of liquid lava. The intense, localized heat instantly vaporizes the solid surface rock itself. Heavy silicon, magnesium, and iron forcefully form a thin, highly toxic, mineral-rich atmosphere directly on the day side. As fast atmospheric currents violently carry these vaporized, heavy minerals straight toward the twilight terminator line, they rapidly, abruptly cool. CoRoT 7b is a horrific world where it actually rains solid, heavy rocks. The freezing night side of the planet is entirely plunged into eternal darkness and freezing temperatures, potentially hundreds of degrees absolutely below zero, rapidly creating a solid, totally frozen rocky crust. If a planet can somehow maintain a stable, 20-hour orbit while actively possessing a massive global lava ocean on one side and a completely frozen wasteland on the other, how do we possibly define the true structural limits of a terrestrial world completely before it is physically, violently torn apart by massive stellar gravity? Exactly 48 light-years straight out from Earth, deep in the constellation of Leo, is a bizarre world that completely, fundamentally upends our entire understanding of planetary composition. GJ 1214b was officially discovered in 2009. It is heavily classified as a sub-Neptune, actively possessing a heavy mass, roughly 7 times that of Earth. However, complex data actively collected by the Hubble Space Telescope in 2012 revealed a totally stunning, highly unexpected physical reality. The entire transmission spectrum was entirely featureless. This perfectly flat, blank spectrum, directly combined with the planet's exact density calculations, actively led astrophysicists to a highly radical conclusion. GJ 1214b is absolutely not made of solid rock, and it is absolutely not a traditional light gas giant. It is a highly compressed water world. The heavily accepted mainstream explanation safely estimates that actual water makes up a massive, dominant percentage of the planet's total mass, vastly more than the tiny, microscopic fraction of water found here on Earth. Earth's oceans are incredibly, surprisingly shallow directly compared to the sheer size of our planet, actually making up just 0.02% of our total mass. On GJ 1214b, massive amounts of water is the absolute primary building block of the entire world. The absolute counterintuitive reversal heavily lies exactly in the bizarre state of that water. GJ 1214b completely orbits very close to its red dwarf star. The heavy surface temperatures easily reach 230 degrees Celsius. At this high temperature, water completely on Earth rapidly boils into vapor. But absolutely because of the planet's massive heavy gravitational field and incredibly thick, highly dense atmosphere, the atmospheric pressure is utterly crushing. This immense, constant physical pressure actively, physically, forces the water directly into highly exotic states of matter that absolutely do not naturally exist anywhere on the surface of our planet. Deep below the incredibly thick, steamy atmosphere, the massive ocean is composed entirely of hot ice, or supersonic water, a bizarre, high-pressure plasma state exactly where water is, completely simultaneously incredibly hot and completely, totally solid. If a massive planetary body can be constructed almost entirely of water, yet exists trapped in a high-pressure plasma state of hot, solid ice, exactly how fundamentally, blindly narrow is our strict terrestrial definition of an ocean? Over exactly 400 light-years away, deep in the constellation of Centaurus, a massive astronomical anomaly forcefully forced stunned researchers to completely re-evaluate the entire physical scale of planetary ring systems. In 2012, highly observant astronomers at the Leiden Observatory and the University of Rochester closely observed a young star, properly known as V1224 Centauri, undergoing a totally bizarre, highly complex, confusing series of deep eclipses. The starlight violently flickered and heavily dimmed over the long course of exactly 56 days in a highly chaotic, completely asymmetrical pattern. The highly complex mathematical model, strictly required to actually explain this strange light curve, definitively revealed the sheer existence of J1407b, a highly massive exoplanet, or, very possibly, a heavy brown dwarf. But the giant planet itself is absolutely not the primary anomaly. The total anomaly is exactly what heavily surrounds it. J1407b actively possesses a massive circumplanetary ring system, literally consisting of well over 30 highly distinct, massive rings. The sheer, physical, astronomical scale of this entire system is absolutely terrifying. The rings entirely span a massive diameter of exactly 120 million kilometers. To directly translate this massive, unearthly scale, if we physically replace Saturn's rings perfectly with the rings of J1407b, they would completely, entirely dominate Earth's night sky, actually appearing visibly significantly larger and many, many times brighter than the full moon. The massive ring system is roughly exactly 200 times significantly larger than Saturn's entire system. The completely mainstream astrophysical model strongly dictates that highly massive ring systems are strictly temporary, highly unstable structures, typically rapidly formed from entirely shattered moons or massive orbital debris, which inevitably, eventually accrete back into completely new satellites, or rapidly fall directly into the planet. The raw data, directly from J1407b, heavily supports this. Researchers clearly detected a massive, dark gap completely in the rings, strongly indicating that a massive exomoon, roughly exactly the size of Mars, has already successfully formed, physically sweeping the orbit totally clear of dust. The massive, counterintuitive reversal is the immense, staggering mass strictly required to actively sustain this massive architecture. The absolute total mass of the rings is roughly exactly equivalent completely to the mass of Earth. This is absolutely not a highly thin, beautiful, ethereal halo of light ice crystals. It is a highly heavy, violently grinding, highly chaotic disk of solid rock and thick dust, completely spanning a massive distance, directly comparable to the massive gap completely between the Earth and the Sunday. If massive planetary ring systems can actively achieve a sheer mass and total diameter that heavily rival the entire orbits of entire terrestrial planets, what utterly terrifying! Massive gravitational mechanics actively govern their completely inevitable violent collapse. Exactly 40 light-years straight away, in the constellation of Cancer, heavily lies an exoplanet, heavily designated 55 Cancri e. Completely orbiting a highly sun-like star, it is a massive super-Earth, actively possessing a heavy mass, roughly exactly 8 times, completely that of our planet. For many years, 55 Cancri e was very heavily and famously sensationalized strictly by the media completely as the so-called diamond planet. Very early mass and exact radius calculations actively suggested a highly carbon-rich interior. Because the planet actively experiences crushing, immense internal pressure, and extreme brutal heat, highly optimistic theorists heavily proposed that its massive core was composed entirely, completely of solid, beautifully crystallized diamond. However, the highly advanced James Webb Space Telescope completely and very recently entirely shattered this comfortable, highly appealing science fiction narrative, actively revealing a harsh physical reality that is vastly far more highly hostile. The JWST's highly sensitive near-infrared camera actively analyzed the exact thermal emissions coming directly, perfectly from the massive planet's blazing day side. The hard data conclusively proved that 55 Cancri e is absolutely not a beautiful, sterile, solid diamond. It actively possesses a highly dense, extremely volatile atmosphere, highly likely composed entirely of heavy carbon monoxide or toxic carbon dioxide, actively bubbling out violently of a massive, global ocean of heavily molten magma. The massive planet actively orbits its star completely at a highly terrifying distance of strictly just 2 million kilometers, actively completing a full year in completely less than exactly 18 hours. It is totally, permanently tidally locked. The blazing dayside temperature easily, completely reaches exactly 2,400 degrees Celsius. But the true physical anomaly is the highly complex atmospheric movement. The raw JWST data actively showed clearly that the absolutely hottest physical point perfectly on the planet is completely, absolutely not directly facing the bright star, as it absolutely technically should be, perfectly on a tidally locked world entirely without an atmosphere. The massive heat is physically, highly actively shifting. The terrifying, counterintuitive reversal is the exact mechanism of this massive heat transfer. The massive, boiling, churning magma ocean is absolutely constantly, violently outgassing heavily right into the thick, toxic atmosphere. Massive, supersonic winds forcefully catch this heavily superheated carbon gas and aggressively drag it entirely across the twilight boundary, completely into the freezing night side, actively distributing the completely horrific, boiling heat entirely across the entire global globe. If a completely tidally locked rock can actively, heavily maintain a completely dense atmosphere absolutely by constantly violently boiling its own liquid magma surface directly into a massive, toxic gas, is the entire strict distinction perfectly between a rocky planet and a completely gas giant, entirely merely a simple matter of exact physical proximity, completely to the fire? Our absolute final destination safely holds a highly unique, dark distinction completely in the entire history of science. In 1992, observant astronomers Alexander Woolsjan and Dale Frail actively discovered the absolute, very first completely confirmed exoplanets entirely outside our completely solar system. But they absolutely did not pleasantly find them peacefully orbiting a warm, welcoming, bright sun. They discovered them highly actively orbiting completely. PSRB 1257 plus 12, a totally dead pulsar. A highly dead pulsar is a completely rapidly spinning, massive neutron star, the completely ultra-dense, totally dead remnant, heavily left completely behind, absolutely after a massive star, violently explodes entirely in a catastrophic, highly destructive supernova. This highly specific, dead pulsar entirely spins with a highly terrifying velocity, violently sweeping massive beams of intense, highly deadly radiation completely across the dark cosmos. Completely surrounding this absolutely dead star are exactly 3 rocky planets, completely named Draugr, Poltergeist, and Phobiter. The highly dark names are heavily drawn completely from mythology, actively representing the totally undead and highly dark nightmares. Draugr is a highly tiny fragment, actively possessing completely, only exactly 2% completely, of Earth's total mass. The absolute, totally counterintuitive reversal is that these dead planets absolutely should entirely not physically actively exist. A massive supernova explosion is completely one of the absolute, completely most violently destructive physical events entirely in the entire universe. Absolutely. Any planetary system safely orbiting the completely original star absolutely should heavily have been instantly, violently vaporized entirely, or highly violently ejected completely straight into deep space. Yet, these exactly 3 massive worlds completely remain. Mainstream, highly accepted astrophysics completely posits exactly 2 totally terrifying possibilities. Completely, either they are the entirely scorched, totally dead solid iron cores, completely of massive former gas giants, whose entire massive atmospheres were completely stripped away actively by the blast, or they totally formed entirely, completely out of the highly radioactive ash, and totally dead debris heavily left behind, absolutely after the star completely died. These dead planets actively exist, completely in a highly dark environment, absolutely fundamentally hostile completely to living matter. They are totally continuously heavily bathed entirely in completely lethal torrents, highly of X-ray and massive gamma-ray radiation. Absolutely any atmosphere is completely immediately shredded. Absolutely any surface is totally baked completely by highly hard radiation. If the completely, very first planets we totally ever discovered were absolutely highly dead zombie worlds, completely born entirely from the dead ashes, completely of a totally dead star, and entirely bathed, completely in deadly, highly hard radiation. Exactly how much completely of the vast universe is totally built, absolutely not entirely from the gentle creation completely of life, but completely from the totally raw mechanics, absolutely of total cosmic destruction? What these physical anomalies confirm is that our models are drastically incomplete. The universe does not exist to fit our mathematical equations. It forces us to rewrite them entirely. Which of these 8 exoplanets completely shatters your understanding of what is physically possible?